Just in that phone call, our lives flipped upside down.
And for me, Jonah gives a new meaning to standing back up.
And my first impression was, oh Lord, what do I have here?
I'm Jonah Martin, and this is my story.
The actual incident, only I was in the gymnasium, and it actually was, to some degree, unremarkable. Jonah was in a press in a basketball game. He had stolen the ball. He was headed down for what appeared to be an easy layup. He didn't have any defender near him, and he got about a step beyond the free throw line, and he went down.
So I was running down the court, and just felt my legs give out. It was funny, when I initially felt the impact, I turned to the ref. I thought someone had tripped me. But then, in the impending moments, I could tell something was a little wrong. We called the trainer onto the floor, and I realized I couldn't really bend and move my leg.
When she got to him, it started to become clear that there was something more than just a typical twisted ankle or something like that. I had to prevent myself from being the helicopter parent and sit there for at least a minute or two while they addressed him.
We found out that night I had broken the growth plates off of my tibia. It's called a tibial tubercle fracture. And so when those broke off, I literally couldn't straighten my leg even if I wanted to. I just didn't even really feel it at first, but I could tell because my legs, they just wouldn't stop shaking. There's actually less than a 1% chance that what happened to me happens. It was a very interesting injury. It was funny because of the lack of mobility. It actually qualified as kind of like an emergency surgery.
We're very fortunate where we live. We have one of the most highly ranked children's hospitals available.
I remember that morning waking up, I was a little groggy already, and then they started administering, anesthesia, and so I was starting to fall asleep. And the last thing I remember my surgeon saying, right to my face, right as they're wheeling me back, was, I've actually never gotten to do this surgery before. And then I was out.
Like, you just hope everything's gonna be okay, put on your best face, and as the clocks tick in the waiting room, you just pray.
I woke up a couple of hours later. I heard them talking, saying that the surgery went well. Ended up with 3 screws in each knee to reattach the growth plate. Out of surgery, they gave me some more pain meds, and it was a really vague 2 hours. I ended up being in there for about a week. I was in 2 straight leg casts, couldn't really move around, pretty much doing everything. Going to the bathroom, getting up, eating on my own was a struggle.
Jonah couldn't really do anything for himself, so we were there together most of the time.
And so mentally, I'll admit, I was in a pretty bad place. There was a lot of negative thoughts, and finding out all these things, that it would be months before I could even get my cast removed, and months past that before I could even start walking again. It was not a fun time to be in.
But I think the real issue as parents is your feeling of helplessness. There were times that if I could have given him my knees, I would have, rather than have him endure what he did. You're in a hospital. That's not where you're supposed to be with your kid. But I think that became indicative of what I hope we instilled in Jonah, and what I hope becomes the attitude of all of our family. And that was just a step that had to be taken. It was not a defeat. It was just an obstacle, and we overcame it.
Yeah, so after about a week, I finally got to go home again, and getting there was quite a mixture of feelings. It was kind of bittersweet coming home because it was a reminder of all the things that I couldn't do.
Our house is older. We don't really have a lot of handicapped accessible doorways. When we first started, it took 4 of us to get Jonah in the house. So Jonah had full leg casts, but he could stand on his feet. So we stood Jonah up, collapsed the wheelchair down, put the wheelchair through the doorway, sat Jonah back down, and went back down the hall. We had to do that through 2 doorways in our house. He lived in our family room for weeks, almost 2 full months. And that family room became his bedroom, his dining room, his bathroom, his recreation room, everything. That was the space Jonah lived in. And anytime we had to leave to take him to an appointment, it was an hour to get him out of the house, go to the appointment, and then an hour to get him back in the house. When Jonah first came home in a wheelchair, 2 straight leg casts, he talked to his grandmother. And And he said, Grandma, there are some people who are gonna be in a wheelchair always. But he said, I'm not one of them. He said, I'm gonna get up and get out of this wheelchair. So this is just temporary for me. Physical therapy started easy, and Jonah could make all the steps he was supposed to make most of the time. The problem is when you break one leg, you strengthen or get that leg back in shape to compare to your good leg. When you break both legs, what's the goal? What's the standard? What are we supposed to get back to?
I remember I was always an impatient patient with my physical therapist. And I just the second I got there, I was like, let's start standing, let's start walking. And so then finally one day, obviously he knew I was ready, but he gave in and he was like, all right. And he took my braces off and he was like, stand up. I just remember looking over that table and I was like, if I stand up, am I just gonna hurt something again? And I remember it was probably a good 10 to 15 minutes before I actually slid my legs off the table and tried standing up. And so that's where I think psychologically some things started turning around for me. It was less of an attitude of what had I lost and more of an attitude of what can I get back. I was starting to do some running, starting to do some jogging, starting to do some agility, some balancing, a lot of balancing. Eventually some leg press, things like that to build strength in my legs. I really started to build strength, but I kept getting the no from my doctors. No, you can't go play sports. No, you can't go run around. And so they gave me all these goals to hit, but even when I started hitting them, it kind of felt like there was just another goal before they would let me return to sports.
And I was the one who took him to those appointments where Jonah would say, this week, Grant? And Grant would say, no, Jonah, a little bit more. This week, Grant? No, Jonah. It became really stressful, but Jonah kept working.
And so I think it would be the end of that summer, which was about 3 to 4 months out. I got to go into a baseball game to pitch. And I wasn't allowed to run or hit, but I could pitch. And I remember being so excited. And I warmed up in the bullpen and I was actually doing good. And then I got into the game and I think I ended up walking in 3 or 4 runs. And it was probably the worst moment of baseball that I had ever played. And everyone around me was like trying to view the positive. They were like, you got to be back out there. You finally got here. And for me, I was just kind of in an attitude, a mode where it just wasn't really ever enough. I came back and I couldn't hit a baseball the same way. And I couldn't make plays at first the same way. I wasn't quite as mobile and as limber, as flexible.
I think that's what we saw that on your junior year where, defensively you weren't as loose or as limber at first base, but we've always had that discussion of getting your legs into it, getting your lower half into it more.
While I got to return to sports about a year past my injury, I really don't think I started playing again until about 2 years out. And that kind of became a big personal struggle for me. Something I maintain to this day, that I lost a lot of time, a lot of experience in some of those sports. I'm not the same player that I was, and that's something I constantly have to try and get back to. It also helps me realize as a senior that I wasn't ready to be done. And I remember just standing up there in front of all the cameras and the balloons and the celebration and whatever, and I was like, I don't think I'm ready to play my last baseball game. I wasn't ready to know that it was my last game. And I found the club baseball team at High Point, and I told my parents, whether I make it or not, I'm gonna try. I don't want it to be over if that's within my control.
And I think in the back of your head a little bit, you're like, am I good enough as an all-around player? I know I could hit at that level, but am I good enough? And it was almost that self-doubt where I'm like, no, you could play.
And so knowing that, I came to High Point. First couple of weeks, I tried out for the club baseball team and got to play with them for this fall season. Playing baseball here at High Point was a very unique experience. It's a great group of guys and a really supportive coach who knows my story and supported me trying to play baseball.
I see a guy that's coming in that played for his high school, that may have had a lot of opportunities, small numbers on the team, that wasn't 100% sure of what he could do when he got here to High Point, but letting me know that whatever opportunities had, he was going to make the best of it. After hearing Jonah's story, at first I thought Jonah was going to be just a really timid player, kind of a backseat guy. I felt like there was some confidence issues there, not being very confident in himself, but still felt like he could do it if given the opportunity. But as far as playing ability, Jonah's going to give you everything he has. He knows he's going to make mistakes, but he does it going at it 100 miles per hour, and he's not afraid to make a mistake. And then the good thing that Jonah does is he recognizes his mistake and he knows how to correct them and comes back and usually has a much better game if that happens. But overall, Jonah's been a really good addition to our program.
If I could go back and tell myself one thing before this all happened, I'd start with have faith. Have faith in the process, in the people around you, and in yourself. Secondly, I think I'd tell myself never to regret anything. I think during a long part of that phase, I spent so much time regretting what I had lost, regretting where I was in my recovery, my progress, regretting what I was doing day to day, and there's just not enough time in life to fill it with regrets.
I hope that what Jonah's teammates take from him, if they get 4 years to learn and experience life from him, is that there will be a tomorrow, and that life is a lot bigger than any game, no matter how much you love it.